Well, good morning, everyone, again. I'm going to have you get out your hymn books, if you would, please. And we're going to make a little switch here. Pastor Norm, he gave me a gift on the way out. He knew that I worked on Wednesday night at St. Olaf. That was our last worship service. And then Thursday morning, I got in the car, and instead of pointing it west, I pointed it north. And he knew that I was going to have one day to get everything ready. So he picked all the hymns. And we're going to give one back, okay, because nobody knows it. So at least that's Julie. So Julie and I decided we're going to sing 759, and I'd like you to lay it out on your laps. And those of you who are maybe here in December know that I've got a little different preaching style, and we'll talk and we'll sing a little bit, okay? Can y'all hear okay? Everything good? Okay, good. If I see a bunch of people going like this, I'll know that I'm supposed to move the microphone up here rather than down here, okay? So just go ahead and do that. That's all right. That's all right. So I'd like to begin today by talking a little bit about icebergs. And I don't know if you know this, icebergs, those things that fall off the polar caps and they float around the ocean and they cause dangerous mishaps with ships. Many movies over the Titanic have been made about the iceberg, right? But I don't know if you know this or not, but when you see an iceberg in the water, you see about 8% of the total iceberg. Something like 92% of an iceberg is hidden beneath the surface of the water. All right? So maybe you see this much, that much is down below. And it's all hidden. It's out of sight. And I think people are a lot like that. We're kind of icebergs. What people see of you and me is only about 8% of what we really are. Okay? And then you start seeing people's behavior. And sometimes you think, oh, that's an interesting thing. But what you don't see is the reasons for the behavior. And it's all underneath the surface, below eye level, things you can't see. So, give you a few for instances. Child comes to school, and the child acts out in school over and over and over again. What does everybody see? Child's acting out, right? Misbehaving. What do? I don't know. I know what they did when I was in school. You put them in the corner. Is that what you still do, Kiri? No. Okay. Why? Because you now understand icebergs, don't you? That's exactly right. So all we see is the misbehavior. But what you don't see is that this child gets up every morning by himself. And he gets himself dressed, and he brushes his teeth if he thinks about it, and nobody cares. And he is starving for attention. He's just dying, aching for someone to notice him. And so he comes to school, and he starts acting out because that's the only way he knows how to get attention. And what did we do back when I was in school? Put him in the corner. But there's an iceberg down there of all kinds of things that we don't see and all kinds of reasons why we act the way we do. A young girl, she goes out in public, and when she does, she wears big baggy clothes. And her hair is cut so it comes down like this, and she wears dark glasses. Really dark glasses, big glasses that are dark. And that's what you see of her. What you don't see is that she has an eating disorder. And every time she looks in the mirror, she's just so filled with shame that she can't possibly let anyone else see what she is. And so she puts on the big baggy clothes. And she combs her hair in a straight part, and it comes down here so you can barely see the side of her face. And she puts on those dark glasses so that she can't be seen. She doesn't want anybody to know what she is. Or a person who's angry all the time. So angry that you find yourself avoiding this person. Because every time you run into them, they've got something else that's a buzzsaw, and you don't want to get caught in their buzzsaw. That's what you see. That's the 10%, the 8%. What you don't see is that this person has been wounded time and time again. He extended himself out there. Someone hurt him. And he's like an animal with a sore. And so he protects the sore. He keeps it close. He doesn't let anybody in, doesn't let anyone get close. And as soon as they start getting close, he lashes out. He barks. He bites. Why? Because he's afraid to be vulnerable. 10% versus 90%. And then there's most of us, the rest of us. Because, you can say, well, that's that person, this person, and we all have these sort of happy, normal lives. But underneath the surface, there's always stuff there. A few years ago, there was a movie by the name of Ordinary People. This goes back a few years, back in the 80s. Did anybody remember this movie? Some of you remember it? If you have not seen this movie, go see it, or go rent it. You can't see it anymore. You can't go to but you go rent it. It's a Robert Redford film, and it's about this family where one of the sons dies in a very tragic accident, and the other son lives through the accident. And they look like perfection. And they work so hard to make it look like everything is just fine in their lives. They've gotten over this, and they're just going to go on with life as usual. And Robert Redford is just a master. So she'll pull out the drawer, and you will see lined up perfectly are all the silverware in there, and they're all wrapped in napkins with bands around them, and everything's in perfect order. She opens up a closet, and the closet is in perfect order. Everything is impeccable. And their lives are a wet, hot mess. But nobody can see it, and they try to hide it. We're all icebergs. We've all been there. In one way, shape, or form, this is who we are. What I see of you today, what I know of you today, what you see of me today is only a small percentage of what we really are. And underneath that is a whole lot of stuff, and some of it's good, and some of it's not so good. Let's take a moment and sing a verse. Man, you guys sound good. You sing very well. This is going to be fun. Congregation that sings. So the lesson I just read to you, the lesson from the second chapter of John, it's Jesus going in, and he turns over the money changers of the temple, and he releases all the animals and sets them out. And this story is actually told in 4 different places in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But John's telling of the story is very different in a lot of respects than the other tellings of the story. For one thing, it's told at a different time in Jesus' ministry. The other 3 tell it that it happens on Palm Sunday. This one happens at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. And so the one on Palm Sunday this is sort of the last straw for all the religious leaders. They're not going to put up with this anymore. This is when they decide to put Jesus to death. Okay, this one's different. This is at the beginning of the ministry, so it takes on a very different character. And then there's also something else. The reason that Jesus does this, goes in and upsets the temple the way he does and just turns it inside out. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus does this, and he angrily says, "You have taken my Father's house and turned it into a den of robbers." In John's gospel, he says, "Do not turn my Father's house into a market house." And in fact, the Greek word is, the English word for the Greek term is emporium. Don't turn it into an emporium. Don't turn it into a marketplace. And that's very different, isn't it? So in one case, the robbers, we're fleecing the flock. We're having you buy something that won't do anything. We're charging you an exorbitant price for it. And so that way we can fill the church coffers. This is different. This is Jesus saying that transactional religion is just cheap junk. Okay? So in order to understand this, you have to sort of understand what was going on at the time period. People wanted to come and worship, and they had to go to the temple in Jerusalem. And when they went to the temple, the way they would worship is they would sacrifice an animal, right? And so it's sort of like layers of purity is what actually happens. So you can't come out and go out in the marketplace and go buy an animal and bring it in and sacrifice it at the altar, because that animal's not pure. In fact, you're not pure when you come in, because everybody's an iceberg, right? All right? So you bring your animal in, you get to the gate, and they say, no, you can't bring that animal in here. It's not right. There are others in here that you can go buy. So you take this animal and put it out here. Then you walk in, and you put down your coins, your Roman coins, and they said, you can't pay for that animal with those coins, because those coins are unclean. So you have to go over here first, where you can exchange the coins for temple currency that is clean. So you come over here, all right, and you exchange the coins. So now you got clean coins, and you come over here and you buy either a pigeon or an ox or a cow or whatever it is you want to buy. It was really a matter of what you could afford. And then you come over here to the altar, except you can't go to the altar. No one can go to the altar except to the priest. In fact, there is a curtain between the altar and everyone else. And the only one who was allowed back in the back of the altar was the priest. And in fact, interesting little point, the priest always had a rope tied to his ankle when he went in. Because if he had a heart attack when he was behind the curtain, the only way they could get him out was to pull him out by the rope. Isn't that crazy? So you come here, put your money down, change your money for clean money, pick up your clean animal, you give it to the priest, you have a little audience with the priest, and then the priest goes behind the altar, behind the curtain, into the altar, and sacrifices the animal on your behalf. So it's sort of levels of purity. I think the idea here is you start chipping away at the levels of the iceberg underneath. And it all looks so nice, and it does absolutely nothing. It's all just transaction, because while your animal's over here, you're over here, and the iceberg is still there, and nothing has changed. And so Jesus comes in that day, and he turns over the table of the money changers, and he sets the animals free, and he says, stop turning religious faith into a market where you can just buy and sell and call it good with God, because it isn't doing anything for the people that you're serving. There are real people with real lives who are really hurting. There is 100% iceberg, and you're only seeing 8%, and nothing's happening with the 92. And that's why Jesus is so angry, and that's why he comes. He comes to turn religious faith upside down. He comes to turn the world upside down. He comes not to turn God into someone you pay off, but he brings God to you to change your heart. Let's sing. Okay, I wasn't kidding. You guys really do sing good. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I wish you could stand up here with me, but then nobody would be singing. You'd all be standing up here. Right? So last week they had my last Sunday at St. Olaf, and down the street from St. Olaf, about a block and a half, is something called Beacon of Hope Ministries. Have any of you ever heard of it? Beacon of Hope is a men's homeless shelter. And, do I have stories? We have had so much fun over the years. And so I got to know the guys pretty well when I worked there. I would go down once or twice a week and have lunch with them. We'd just sit and we would visit. And so I go back to this. So this was one of the gifts. It was made by one of the Beacon boys. I don't know if you see it or not. It says, Pastor Dave, Beacon Boys. And isn't that gorgeous? It's just absolutely amazing. And it is so them. It's one of my prized possessions now. But what I found was, and by the way, I'm probably on my day off, probably eat lunch down there, because I find that when I'm with these guys, that I don't know how they do it, but their icebergs float 100% on top of the water. I mean, there's just, there's no hiding anything. So I'll have lunch with I had lunch with Tracy the other day, and I said, "How's it going, Tracy?" He said, "I haven't seen you for a while." He said, "Yeah, I came back in here. My girlfriend kicked me out again, and we had a knockdown drag out, and I landed back here." And he said, "But you know, God's good." And then another guy, his name is Toby, and I haven't seen Toby for a while because Toby would bounce in and out of the Beacon, so he'd be in for a while, and he's a good-hearted guy. He just wants to do the right thing, but he's got this demon that he has to deal with. It's the nose candy, and he gets into it, and then he can't stay there anymore. And then he cleans up, and he comes back, and how you doing, Toby? I see you've been gone. He said, yeah, but I'm so glad for this place because, you know, this is where God's grace reigns supreme, and this is where I'm going to be healed. And, you know, you hang around people like that for a while, and all of a sudden, you find your iceberg starting to float a little bit too. And all those things that we conceal so well beneath the surface of a well-tailored life, it's a little easier for them to pop up. And you know, what I'd like to think would happen here at First Lutheran is that this would be a place where we forget about all the transactional theology and all the pay-for-view religion. This is a place where we bring everything that no one else can see, and we lay it beneath the altar, knowing that this is the reason that Jesus has come into our lives. And it's not about looking good, and it's not about doing the right thing. It's about simply having a relationship with a God who loves you so much that he comes into this world and he dies for you. And guess what? Even if you never expose your iceberg to anybody else, he sees it. He says, "That's why I'm here." And then if we can get past that just a little bit, maybe we'll start sharing our vulnerabilities with each other. Just a little bit. We don't want this to get too scary. But you know, if I can be bold enough to say, I've got this problem, then you might say, I've never told anybody, but I've got the same problem too. And then church begins. And then Jesus is known, not just in our hearts individually, but we share it together. And we're strengthened together in the bonds of Christian love. And for that, we give God thanks and praise. Amen.